Hi, and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk through the techniques I used whilst painting this abstract piece. And you can follow the process from start to almost finished. I think I'd chopped quite a lot of the footage off at the end because I was just fiddling about and not really making many bold moves, but I'll show you the final finished piece at the end of the video. I've also sped the footage up in places because we would be here for quite a while otherwise. First up, I start scribbling onto the panel with a Neo Colour 2 in the pink shade. This is just loose mark making to get something down onto the panel so I'm not faced with a blank white space. Sometimes starting is the hardest part, but once I've made some initial marks, it gets me in the flow and I start to think about what my next steps might be. There's no meaning to these marks and it's all about play in these early layers, which will eventually be covered over. I then go on to loosely blocking in colour with acrylic paint, and this is a smooth panel which has already been gessoed, so it's ready to paint straight onto. I get these panels from Jackson's and this is 13 by 18 centimetres. I've just been using a store card here to scrape paint over the surface, filling the area quite quickly with paint. Here you can see me dry brushing over the wet paint with a hardware brush to blend the lighter and darker areas together. I like to chop these hardware brushes down so the ends are quite stubby, because then you have a bit more control over the brush marks, but here I'm just rubbing the brush loosely over the paint to blend. I also love scratching into the paint with a palette knife in these earlier layers to add some texture and interesting marks. Make sure to do this when the paint is still relatively wet. Using a bank or store card to scrape the wet paint over the surface is another lovely technique to add texture and unusual marks. You can get specific tools that I think are called catalyst wedges or colour shapers, but I find this card works perfectly fine for now, and I have some dough scrapers too, which you'll see me use later. I'm now back with the palette knife, creating more deliberate scratches into the paint. You can use the tip of the knife to create very thin scratches, or the full side of the knife to create broader scrapes across the paint. Now I'm layering the pink Neo Colour 2 crayon back over the paint, and I like scribbling the crayon into the wet paint to create grooves with bright pops of colour. Now I'm just layering up thicker areas of paint with this fairly large flat brush. The larger the brush the better really, as this keeps the marks loose and free. I'm thinking about the direction of the brush marks as I'm laying down the paint, and where I want contrast of long vertical brush marks against shorter horizontal strokes, all to build up layers of texture. To add a bit more contrast into the piece, I'm now laying down very thick white paint with a palette knife. I'm using heavy body acrylic paint here, so it's very thick and good for impasto techniques. I like the contrast between thick and thin layers of paint, and I play around for quite some time here, just moving the paint around until I'm happy with how it looks. I'm smoothing out the paint here with a brush, but then all of a sudden I'm like, right, this needs disrupting with something a bit bolder, and I use one of my dough scrapers to drag the paint across the surface. It creates such interesting marks and texture that when people see the painting they will probably wonder how it was done. This is my favourite part of the painting process, as it was a happy accident. When I brought the dough scraper down over the paint, it just created these amazing marks, so then I couldn't touch this side of the painting after doing this, as I just loved the effect. So I'll let you watch the rest of the video and come back and show you the finished painting at the end.